How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? What's the real truth about Citizen Kane?
It'll probably turn out to be a very simple thing.
Well, hi everybody. Hope you're doing well. I'm Parker.
And I'm Max.
And welcome back to Better Than Citizen Kane, the highly subjective show where we look at a movie and ask the question, is it better than Citizen Kane?
As always, if you like Citizen Kane, that's fine, because we're not here to hate on it.
But when every movie ever made is a reasonable contender for the title of greatest film of all time, you have to wonder, better than Citizen Kane?
So, be well ensured that you've got the beat, because today we are talking about Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
These are getting better and better each time. These are nice. These are good.
Thank you very much. There's not much that I was like, order a pizza, crack open your Land of Truth and Liberty textbook.
So if you're a young and successful guy.
Oh man, if you're a single successful guy.
Enjoy.
Oh, that would have been it.
That would have been a good one.
Wow, and that's my favorite joke in the movie.
It's a good joke.
It's a good joke.
Yeah, so hello everybody. For those of you watching at home, you can see that this is a little bit different setup this time. I dropped the ball. I was shooting a short film over the weekend, and the mic that I used to record, I brought to, record sound with, and then I'm going back tonight and didn't think to bring it home with me, so Max was kind enough to bail me out and bring a mic that wasn't just a, a webcam mic to spare your ears a little bit. This is a little bit lower quality than we usually have, but it is still better quality than what it would have been.
Yeah, it's really noble of me to come to your house.
It is.
Because I hate it here.
I know. You can't stand it.
I hate being here. I hate this mic, my own mic. No, it's great to be here.
It's great to be here,
It's honestly
everybody.
fine. I told you this multiple times.
I know.
I don't care.
I had to take the brunt if anybody's
Well,
like,
thank you.
oh, well, like, why is it
like,
sound
Max
bad?
did this. Thank
Max
you for
did
clearing
this.
it up.
Yeah, I had to make sure.
Yeah, when we go to court.
Exactly. So today we're looking at Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Which neither of us had seen before.
We had not. Which was very fun. It was
Very
a good
fun.
time. It was
And
a good time
it's a fun
watching.
movie.
It's a fun movie.
For the most part.
Yeah. And we'll get into it.
Yeah. But yeah, okay, so I don't know, how do you want to kick off with this?
I mean, I would love to know what you knew about this movie beforehand.
Not much. I think I was thinking of a different 80s movie.
Okay.
Or something. I was thinking of I don't know. I think I just had such a perception of this, and I don't think the poster helps. So much of the posters from the time are just Spicoli.
Yeah.
With those two ladies from his dream.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, crazy times or whatever. And so I was like, okay, it's like a raunchy sex comedy about this kid.
Mm-hmm.
And the movie starts and it's not that at all.
No.
I understand why they sold this on Sean Penn's Spicoli.
Sure.
I understand. Especially in the years after, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
I understand why that has become this movie's lasting legacy. But I think that does it a disservice.
I agree.
So going into this, I was like, okay, it's going to be probably pretty fun.
Mm-hmm.
But I was expecting more of a Porky's.
Yeah.
Or like a Revenge of the Nerds, or
yeah.
one of the less great Hughes movies of those kinds.
Yeah.
And I was very pleasantly surprised, to the point that I gave this a higher rating than you gave it.
Yeah.
But yeah, what was your kind of knowledge of
About the
this
same, I knew of it.
Yeah.
I had heard the name before. I knew, my introduction to this movie was actually, I can't remember if I've mentioned it on the podcast before or not. There's a documentary I really like about the first half of it's about the creation of the National Film Preservation, and then the rest of it's the history and the movies that are in there.
Okay.
And Fast Times is there. It's in the film registry.
Yeah.
And so they interview the director and they have a little segment about
Amy Heckerling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of how I knew about this movie.
Okay.
And I think I'd seen before, which is the same clip they show in this documentary, of the ordering the pizza in class.
Yeah.
I knew about that
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
And that was basically it.
Yeah.
And same sort of thing, I was kind of expecting something very Spicoli-centric.
Yeah.
And very much, like you said, I was expecting a raunchier Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It's kind of
with
what I was.
Spicoli.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
he's taking down Mr. Hand or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Not that at all.
No.
He's in it.
Yeah.
And I understand why they were this is going to be a huge success. And it was.
Right.
I have a quote from, I did research for this episode.
Ooh.
Unlike Metropolis or even Citizen Kane or Vertigo, I'm going to put a lot of effort into Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Sure.
And so mainly it's just because I got the Criterion DVD at the library, and they come with the essay that's in there. So I have, what's the author's name? Dana Stevens' essay on Fast Times from the Criterion release.
Cool.
So there's a quote that I'll talk about that a bit more. But I understand why Spicoli is like the face of it.
Yeah.
But bizarre decision to me.
Totally.
Because he is my least favorite part for the most part.
He's
and
fine.
Maybe that's just with time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not my least favorite. He's got funny bits, like his story. Because this movie is broken into 5 stories, sort of.
Pretty
so
much.
You have Brad. And is it Stacy?
I think so.
And then you have Spicoli. And then you have Mark and Mike. And that's kind of 4. And then you kind of have Forrest Whitaker in this movie, which I didn't know. And he showed up and I literally went, Forrest Whitaker! Like he'd walked into my house.
Sure.
But yeah, so that's kind of like the basic stories, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean,
they intersect and...
There's Stacy's friend
Linda,
who like has sort of a B plot,
right?
Her
and like, and that's
Chicago.
kind of like,
but that's still wrapped
like
up in
Forrest
Stacy,
Whitaker's thing.
like,
but him and his brother are wrapped into Spicoli's,
right?
Everything, But Spicoli is like one of 5 stories in this movie,
right? And out of all the stories, I found Stacy's the most engaging.
Stacy's is like easily my favorite of the stories,
right? So that's
although I do like Mark. I think Mark's a kindly nerd that I could relate to.
And Brad's is just funny. Like, Brad's storyline was
and I like that he didn't end
funny.
up being, like, a bad person. I kept kind of waiting for him to do something egregious, but he just was just a guy. He was a single successful guy. And that was my favorite joke. All right, so do we want to dive into it a little bit more in detail now?
Yes, I do. Specifically, well, I can get into this later. We'll talk about more. There's things I want to talk about, but let's, so... We've talked about it a bit, but what's like the basic, like, layman's term rundown of this movie?
So this is based on a book by Cameron Crowe, who also wrote the screenplay. He went incognito at a high school in Southern California for a year at the age of 22 for his book, right? I actually don't know when the book came out. I imagine it was roughly around the same time.
Around the same time, I think.
So he spent like a year at this high school just observing. And then he wrote this book. It was a bestseller. And then they made it into a movie. And it was a movie that... Who made this? Was it Universal? Or I can't remember who...
I think it's Universal, but don't quote me on that.
But whoever the studio was,
yeah,
they really didn't watch this production at all. And you can kind of feel that.
Yeah.
You're kind of like, you just let this happen?
It is Universal.
Okay, yeah. Universal was really busy working on like a big musical that they were working on at the time. So this just kind of was like down, like low key on the line.
Well, this is also her first film.
Yes,
this is the first feature
She's
for
27.
Amy Heckerling.
Amy Heckerling's 27. She had gotten her MFA at AFI. I told you I learned this movie. She'd gotten her MFA at AFI, and this is like her first like shot.
Cool.
Like, we're giving you a movie.
Okay.
Yeah, and so it's based off of Cameron Crowe's book. He's writing the screenplay, but they're working very closely. It isn't just like, let the woman direct the man's movie. It's like they're working closely together on this.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how this movie came about, as far as I know. I don't know much about, like, anything else. I know you looked into trivia, but...
Yeah, I looked into trivia, and we've got a little bit of tidbits later, but, like, nothing that pertains to the kind of basic stuff, I'd say.
So the movie is just kind of like a I don't know what you would call that story. What is that called?
There's a specific term for it that I'm forgetting. It's very vignette-y. Like, it's just like, there's a bunch of vignettes.
We follow them through a school year, basically, right?
Yeah.
And then, because at the end they graduate and stuff. But they don't do, like, a big graduation thing, which I really respected.
Yeah,
of, like,
that was nice.
It doesn't end with that.
Right.
In fact, it ends with an attempted robbery, right?
Yeah. That's,
and then, no, is that the last?
That is the last scene.
Is it?
I'm almost positive.
Is Mark and Stacy before that? Because Mark goes and...
Oh, no, you're right. You're right. He does. I think
and they kiss or whatever.
I think that is the last...
But basically the last like major thing before they wrap up, and because the movie opens with the mall, and then it closes with the mall closing,
right?
They're closing down all the things,
yes,
and that builds right off of Mark and Stacy,
right?
Okay. Anyways, it's like 5 stories of these different high school kids and how they intersect.
Yeah.
So basically, Stacy is pretty young. She works at this hot dog place or burger joint, pizza joint, something.
It's kind of all of it.
All of it.
Yeah.
And
which apparently is a real chain.
Really?
Yeah, and she she got hired for this movie.
Yeah.
And then worked at that chain unrelated for like a month before the movie started. Because she just needed a job.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. But yeah, so Stacy works there. She works with Linda. They're friends from high school. Linda's older, like a little older.
A little older,
like a year older, I think, or something like that. And Linda...
Yeah, she's graduating. Right. She talks about that,
because Linda has a boyfriend, or a fiance in Chicago. Mm-hmm. Do you buy that at all?
No, because her story keeps changing.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's... I think it's intentionally left vague to decide whether or not, like, her boyfriend is a real... Like, her fiance is a real person or not.
He's not real.
No.
That's something that you'd make up.
Right.
Anyway, but, like, I was like, she's talking about it a lot. Like,
see, the only thing that threw me off is the end when she's, like, crying about it.
Yeah, I was like, that's where I was like...
Why are you committed to this?
You're so committed to this. So anyway, she has a boyfriend, she has a fiance in Chicago. And Stacy, there's a hot older man comes in.
Yeah.
And it's Stacy's, like, area at the restaurant. And then she gets his number and whatever. Anyways, I don't know. Do we want to break down every story?
I don't think we need to. Like, there's a lot.
Mark works at the theater. Mike does ticket scalping for bands coming into town. Mark and Mike are friends. At first I thought maybe they were brothers, but they're just friends.
They're just friends.
They're just friends. And then Spicoli is like, he's high. Yeah. That's basically his story. Is that he's high.
And Brad works at a burger place.
And he takes it pretty seriously.
Super seriously.
Yeah. And that's it, really. Yeah.
That's pretty much the gist.
And then you just follow their stories throughout the school year as they intersect and as things happen, and there you go.
Right. That's essentially...
That's the movie.
Right. So what parts of the movie did you like? What parts did you not like?
I really liked this movie for the most part. I had a good time with this. Obviously, there are things that haven't aged well. Obviously, just like jokes and like, you know, how high schoolers act. But I think that the movie gets away with it for me because it's such like a documentary almost. Like it just feels like it's capturing this vibe.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this. I love a vibe movie. A movie where it's like there's not really a story, it just kind of starts and ends, and things can happen.
Sure.
But it's not like a themed narrative or something. Right. And like there can be those things in there, but it's not like we're building to something. Mm-hmm. This is just we're going through it. So I added this to my list of vibe movies.
Nice.
So I just am a big fan of those in the last few years, and so I really enjoyed that this was literally just we're just gonna hang out with some high schoolers for an hour and a half.
Totally.
And like, you know, some of them you're like, this is really annoying, as you would in high school, and some of them you're like, I'm really rooting for you. I had a great time. I had a good time, and also kind of cried. Yeah. About some aspects of Stacy's story. Mm-hmm. But yeah, what about you? Because I gave this 4 stars. You gave it 3.5.
I gave it 3.5. I enjoyed all the same things that you did. Like, I like the fact that it's just a hangout movie. I like the fact that it's very like casual and fun. I like the fact that it's like it's personal stakes. Like, it's not low stakes, because there are some things that happen in this movie. It's like, whoa, that's big stuff. But like, it is very chill for the most part. Like, it's not like lesser high school movies where there is really broad, like there's very much broad like archetyping in this, right? Of like the jocks and the stoners and things like that. But it's not like the preppy mean girls. Like, it's not like there's no antagonists in the school, which a lot of high school movies have, where it's like, all right, here's our bad guy.
Here's our
who's
bully.
Just like, yeah, exactly. Like, there's none of that. It's just, this is much more akin to like what my high school experience was like, of just people kind of doing their own things.
And they like bounce off each other. Yeah. And that's just what it is.
That's just what it is. There is no like personal antagonism.
As opposed to like a Mean Girls, where that is very much riffing off like a nature documentary. Yeah. And like referring to like groups and cliques as like these different things, which is also, I'm not saying that's a knock on that. Sure. I'm just saying this is a different thing.
Yeah, different.
And more akin to my high school experience, and I think a more realistic portrayal.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of what is working for the movie and why it is probably as well remembered as it is because like I can look at it and I can find things that like I identify with and I'm like, oh, that's similar to my high school experience. But like I had the most FOMO at the beginning of this movie where I've never seen a mall this full in my life. Yeah. Like, I just look at the mall, I'm like, wow, this used to just be a hub for, like, teenagers to hang out and socialize. Yeah. And my experience with malls has never been that, even when I was in high school. It's always been weirdly empty, and you go there to go shopping. Yeah. So, like, it was hang out at the mall. It was one of those things, I was watching this movie, and it was my, like, crotchety, you know, millennial, like, oh, look at what phones have taken from us. Like, we've lost so much. Yeah. But I imagine... No, go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say, I think this is the best an 80s mall has ever looked to me. Totally. Like, you have things like Stranger Things, which are trying to recreate exactly this, and you have other movies from this time where, like, we're going to the mall. Right. But this was, like, I think because it opens with just this montage, and it's not, like, a story, it's not, like, we love the mall. It's, like, showing, like, there were a lot of things you could do. Sure.
And I go, oh, okay. Well, now I get it, and that looks fun, and I wish I could have been there.
Yeah, exactly. So same sort of feelings of that. I was like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
So if I'm watching this for the first time in 2023 and feeling that way, I can only imagine that like high schoolers at the time are watching this movie and they're like, oh, they get it.
Yeah.
Like this movie's for me. This is entirely like what my vibe is like.
Yeah.
I did find it very funny. I've got to pull up like the exact phrasing, but there were some kind of like cultural differences for Amy Heckerling because she's from the Bronx.
Okay.
And so when she was working on this movie, there were so many things about like California high school culture that like did not make sense to her. Specifically the idea of like high schoolers owning cars. She's like, why on earth would you let a high schooler drive a car? Like, that's a terrible idea. And everybody, like, on a production team had to explain the idea of, like, beater cars and, like, muscle cars and, like, why this is important to, like, that high school culture, which I thought was very fun.
That is very fun.
But, yeah, so I imagine that's part of why the film is popular and has lasting power is that it was applicable at the time, and it is still, watching it for the first time knowing nothing about it, it's still very much like, oh yeah, this feels akin to a lot of things I've experienced in high school.
That's what's really cool is like it's such a fresh time capsule of the 80s, but also it's not like outdated.
Right.
Me. Like everything in it is very relevant. Even some things where I go, oh, I actually can't relate to that, but because we have it worse, like now, you know? Like,
yeah. So it's, Yeah, we'll get into that. But I think... I don't know. I think the only reason I rated this slightly lower than you is that I think, like, it is a vibe movie, but, like, about... I don't know, like 3/4 of the way through it, I found myself checking my watch, even though it's like 90 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's just like, it kind of lost me a bit near the end.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of where it dropped off slightly from it. But again, it's like, I was waffling between 3.5 and 4 for this. Because, like, it's just a vibe.
Well, and I was too, And then reading Dana Stevens' essay, I was like, this deserves a little more credit.
So tell me what pushed it over the edge for you.
Yeah, I think this is a good time to just dive into
please.
Yeah. So basically what she kind of prefaces this section of the essay on is just saying that like Porky's had come out the year before. And then the John Hughes movies are coming later. You know, which also deal with like sex and those sorts of things. Because this is a sex comedy.
Totally.
But I feel like calling it that for some reason to me feels mean.
Right.
I'm like, it is. But there's more going on. Like it's not just like
it's not American Pie.
Right. It's not just like boobs, man. You're like, all right. Okay. Cool, funny. But yeah, basically what she points out in her essay is this. Fast Times is not really of a kind with Porky's, though. Heckerling's keen sociological snapshot of teen culture and gender politics at a Southern California high school has little, if anything, to do with Bob Clark's nostalgia-driven look back at his own 1950s adolescence, about a pack of sex-starved high school boys. Plus, of course, Heckerling was a female filmmaker at a time when such a creature was vanishingly rare, a variable that is far from the only reason for Fast Times' specialness but can hardly be separated from it.
Yeah.
And I think that, and then there's a little bit more.
Okay.
But there's one or two goals that I'll bring up when we get to the criteria. But it says here of, Heckerling has always had many more tools in her toolbox than her understanding of the female experience. Every one of her films also features complex, sympathetic male characters, and many center around them. But in retrospect, Fast Time's most radical contribution to the teen movie genre may be its matter-of-fact treatment of abortion. Which is what we keep alluding to.
Yeah.
And specifically, this is kind of how I feel like maybe we can start with this, because I think this is something that we both really connected with.
Totally.
And really liked about this movie. And so this is what we'll preface that discussion with this. Of the movie's refusal to treat Lee's character, Stacy, as either a selfish slut or a traumatized victim had imprinted itself on my cinematic sense memory and become part of my own self-conception. I really recommend this essay if you ever get the Blu-ray or like the Criterion release, because she talks a lot about her personal experience with abortion and like growing up, and so I really recommend it.
Cool.
But then she goes on to say, women born a generation later, growing up with schmortion jokes, and Juno deciding not to abort after an encounter with an anti-choice protester, both in movies directed by men, weren't so lucky. And I just think that something that really did push this over the edge for me is just like that, because it kind of just happens. It's not like they do like any real foreshadowing of it.
It's not a melodrama.
It's not like, well, what are you gonna do? And like she also mentions in the essay that I didn't include as a quote, because again, I don't want to just read the essay.
Sure.
But she talks about how there isn't even a scene where she panics and goes, what am I going to do? We see it through Mike Damone's encounter of it, who impregnated her, of her just coming up to him and being like, I'm going to get an abortion. And then his reaction is just like, well, why'd you do that? Like, this is on you. I didn't do anything. And then she goes, don't say that. And then he corrects himself and he goes, okay, like, what do I need to do? Yeah. And she's like, well, it's 150. And so it's like 70 each or whatever. Yeah. And she's like, I've already scheduled the appointment. And it's like, that's really impressive to me and like kind of powerful of just
especially you're 82.
Yeah. It's like, this is 1982. And it's like, we're not going to lean into like, she's panicking. And then she calls Linda later, and because Damone doesn't show up because he doesn't have the money to like contribute or whatever. And basically like, it's like, oh yeah, she also talked to Linda about it, but we didn't see that discussion. And it's not like they're like avoiding that. Right. Because they don't. They're like taking it head on, but it's done with like this just like respect of it. Of just like, and this is just what happens. It's not like stigmatized. It's not like, again, it doesn't play into like the trauma of it. It's just like, well, this happens when you're having unprotected sex as a teenager. Right. And this is what you can do about it. Yeah. And I just thought that was really great.
Yeah. No, I really, that was the thing that stuck with me the most, was that handling of like that entire storyline. Because again, it's just very kind to the characters and it's very honest. Like, again, they don't victimize Stacy.
And
like,
they don't antagonize Mike completely.
No.
The antagonization comes from Linda, which is completely understandable.
Right.
But like, it's not like they're like, he did this on purpose.
Right, because, well, even like, that was the thing that was struck me a lot was that moment where he corrects himself. Yes. And he's like, okay, fine, yeah, like this is, 50% on me. Yeah. And I want to be responsible for that. And then it's not just that he flakes out. Like, the scene before is him calling people, trying to get money.
Because he's been scalping tickets. He's like, you owe me. And basically they're all like, I'm not going to get you money before Thursday. Yeah. And so he literally can't.
He just can't face her.
He just doesn't do it. Right. And that's obviously you're like, do better. But you're like, I understand where you're, like, it's not done
again, it's sympathetic. It's like, okay, it shows that he's trying.
Yeah.
But
when he can't do it, he just is like, well, I'm not going to face it.
He's a kid. Yeah. He's a teenager. Yeah. Like, and I don't know. I thought that was really great. And then on top of that, which was the moment that both of us referenced in our Letterboxd reviews, he doesn't come through with the ride. Right. And so Brad, Stacy's brother, is getting ready to leave. And she's like, hey, I need a ride. Can you take me somewhere? And she's like, oh, I'm just meeting some friends at the bowling alley. He drops her off the bowling alley, and as he's pulling away, he sees her cross the street. And he's like, wait a second. Yeah. She goes into the clinic, has the abortion, and they say, well, we can't release you if somebody's not here to pick you up. And she lies and says, well, my boyfriend's going to meet me in the lobby, so I'll just go downstairs. And I'm like, okay. And she goes outside, and Brad is just sitting there with his car, just waiting for her. And it's just really lovely. And like, the
first thing that he says to her is, since when do you go bowling anyway? Yeah. Which made me cry.
It's really lovely.
It like, especially in 80s movies, I feel like sibling relationships are always played as contentious. Yeah. And there is a bit of that earlier in the film. Sure. But like, he doesn't judge her at all. He's just like, he knew because he's like, yeah, you don't go bowling. Yeah. And then he like asked her like, who did it? Like, who is this?
And she won't tell him.
She won't tell me. He's like, all right, that's your mystery. He doesn't press it. He's just like, all right, that's your secret.
And that's it.
And that's it. That's literally it. And then, of course, like, Linda's pissed, and she, like, writes prick on Mike's log or whatever. But it's like, that's it. There isn't then, like, drama, you know?
And it's not, like, this whole thing of, like, well, I'm going to tell mom and dad, and, like, some argument. Like, again, it's just, I just appreciated the sincerity of that. And it's, like, it's such an honest portrayal of, like, sibling relationships. Yeah. Of all those times where, like, it's just that idea of, like, oh, hey, we can be together and we can have secrets. Yeah. We can watch out for each other in ways that mom and dad can't watch out for each other. Yeah. Which is like such an honest experience of having siblings, I've found. Yeah. But I don't know, I just that whole moment and storyline really stuck out to me. And I did, like, I'm glad that the essay talks about that, because that was kind of my assumption, was that I was like, I don't think a male director would have handled this the same way, especially in the 80s. Yeah. And, like, that was something that was really interesting when I was looking into the trivia, was, like, the director said, not talking about the scene where she gets pregnant, but, like, her first sexual experience with a guy. Yeah. She says, I was trying to make sex seem scary and uncomfortable regarding her approach to showing Stacy's awkward first time. additionally, with the carrot scene, they weren't aiming to make a salacious, like, sex comedy. It was just supposed to be an honest portrayal of, like, hey, kids are interested in sex, and this is what it's like, and sometimes it's going to be awkward and bumpy, and it's not just going to be, like you said, like, whoa, boobs!
Yeah. Or, like, isn't this so hot? Or you're so into this. It's like, all right, like, don't do that. Mm-hmm. I do like that point because, we see, the movie kind of opens with Stacy's first time, which is with a man who is 26. Which and I was like, Stacy.
Yeah, she's 15 and she lies about being 19. I was like,
Stacy, the actress is 19.
Right, the actress is 19.
Joke where he's like, are you sure you're 19? She's like, yep. And I was like, that's pretty good. But like, that was like one thing where I was like, Stacy, come on.
Stacy.
I was like, you don't need to do that. But I liked that focus of like, we see like her perspective and they're doing it in like a dugout, like in a baseball field. And she like sees like a gross light that's on.
Yeah.
And then she looks up and she sees like what's it? Graffiti.
It says like surf Nazis or something.
Yeah, or something like that. And I just loved this like completely unglamorous nature of it. And then and I like that points out of like, or what Amy Heckerling is saying there of like later she, or like maybe before that or after, she like asks Linda for advice on giving a blowjob.
Yes,
and
after.
They use carrots. And like if I feel like, and again, I don't want to just attribute all this movie's like specialness to just Amy Heckerling's gender. Like obviously it's just her as a director and all that stuff. But I do feel like the male gaze is a real thing. And I feel like a male director would have been like, we have two hot, teenage girls sucking on carrots. We're going to lean into this. And it's like, don't. Just don't do that.
Well, like I was watching for like those telltale signs of like sex comedies and the way that they're like shot and the way they're edited.
Yeah.
And like the only two examples I found was that during the montage scene at the mall at the beginning, like there's like a shot of like 5 butts.
Yes.
All in a row.
Yeah. And then later, is it Linda? Brad and Brad's like dream of her, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And that works in the universe because Brad is fantasizing about her while he's jacking off.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a really good use of it, of like, this is how he imagines her. And then it even like cuts out and she's like, obviously it's shot very differently.
Right.
Than like her coming out of the water.
Yeah.
Like, that's great. That was really solid.
I also thought this was very interesting. And I want to know, because did you watch the Criterion release? Okay.
Yeah.
So I'd be interested to know
is this about the TV edit?
Yes.
Or like the original theatrical release where they frame something differently.
Yes.
Yes.
Is it framed differently in the Criterion release?
It's okay. So
cool.
Yeah. So you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So again, very interesting from the director's standpoint. She said that she wanted to show male nudity. That was really important to her because she was like, well, it can't be unequal if we're going to do this both ways. So in the scene with Stacy and Mike, it is Mike, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
That's the first rule of screenwriting is don't have two characters named similarly, especially if they're friends. Mike and Mark.
Yeah, messes me up.
So if we got it wrong,
well, I mean they call him Rat, I guess, but
and they call the other one like Damone.
Yeah,
but anyway.
But during that sex scene, they shot it so that you could see, I think, full frontal on both of them.
Yes.
And
or you see her, like obviously you see her boobs, and then like you see his dick.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so. But she was told that wasn't allowed.
Yeah,
like she brought it back to the studio and said, no, this will get an X rating and we can't do that.
Yeah.
And she was really upset about that because she's like, well, this is essentially nothing now. Because she's like, the girl is giving something up. The girl is giving some sort of privacy up by, going topless. But the man is shirtless and men are shirtless all the time. Like this is nothing now.
It is restored for the Criterion release.
Cool. Okay.
They fixed the framing.
Gotcha. Because the copy I watched is framed that way and you can't see.
Okay. Well, you see it.
Okay. Cool. Well, yeah. I just thought that
another dick.
I just thought that was a very interesting way of talking about it from her perspective. Like, it needs to be equal and. Like, the woman is inherently putting something on the line by being topless, and the man isn't.
Yeah.
So, like, there needs to be some equity if we're going to do this.
I agree. 100%. If you're doing a sex scene, everyone's naked. All right? And we're seeing it.
Yeah.
I'm not in, like, a weird way where I'm like, we're seeing it. But just, like, it's a weird, like, power play.
Totally.
Especially for male directors to be like, well, you're going to show your body. But the man, no.
Right. And
no one wants to see that.
Again, it's that weird commodification, right?
Yeah.
Because, like... you can have a woman topless and that can be... Is that still, like, is that fully R now? Or is it
now
still...
I think it is, but it might have a weird rule.
Because, like, Airplane is PG.
Right, but in the 80s, that was back... Like, even 16 Candles, you see boobs in the first, like, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, and it's PG. And so back then, it was just like, yeah, whatever.
Sure.
Yeah. But now I think there's a lot more restriction on that,
That's
obviously.
good. Yeah, but just that idea, though, of, like, the casualness of it.
Yeah.
And again, it persists to this day. Like, the rating system may be different, but it is this idea of like, well, yeah, like, we can commodify female nudity, but male nudity is distasteful.
Yeah.
Which is weird.
Weird. And yeah, it's just weird.
Yeah. So I don't know, just hearing her thoughts about it and like reading her quotes about like how important it was, how hard she fought for it, I think it's just very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving along, if that's okay. Unless you have anything more you want to say about that storyline. Favorite jokes in this? Because it is a comedy.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I really love Brad's, like, his repetition at the beginning of I'm a single successful guy.
He's rehearsing to break up with his girlfriend. And
he's doing it in the weirdest places.
My favorite gag in this is they just cut to Brad cleaning the bathroom, and he's wiping profanities off the mirror, and he's just looking at himself in the mirror going, I'm a single successful guy. And I deserve freedom. It's like, it's so perfect.
It's so funny.
So funny. The framing of it and the delivery.
That joke is really good. I mean, like, I can't remember specifics. There was like a lot of moments got to me that I really like. I laughed out loud when after Spicoli wrecks Forrest Whitaker's car, and he's like, how are you going to fix this, man? He just wrecks it further and blames it on the other school. I'm like, that's so funny.
Yeah.
Like, that's such a good bit.
That's really good. Yeah. I also, what did you think about Mr. Hand? I feel like in these 80s movies and these high school movies, there's always a teacher that, like, takes it too far.
Yeah.
And, like, Mr. Hand, the whole time, he's pretty, like... I liked him for the most part. I thought he was pretty funny. I love when, obviously, the scene where the pizza comes in.
Sure.
And he's like, it's our time. Like, Spicoli's like, it's our time, so I think I get to eat. He's like, you're right. It is our time. And he takes it up and he invites the whole class. Mm-hmm. It's great. I think that's really good. He goes to Spicoli's house to waste his time.
Yeah, to waste 8 hours of his time.
And it's a really funny bit. Mm-hmm. But I was kind of like, I don't know, Mr. Hand.
That's
weird behavior from you.
It's a very he from the very beginning is more obsessive than any high school teacher
absolutely
would ever be. And that's the bit.
Yeah.
I did in that scene. I did find it very funny that like Mr. Hand comes over and then they cut away to another storyline.
Yeah.
And, like, they leave it on a note of, like, Spicoli being like, oh, no, I'm going to miss the prom. Yeah. And then it cuts back, and it's Spicoli summarizing, like, why the American Revolution happened in the Declaration of Independence. And Mr. Hand's like, well, yeah, that's actually kind of correct. Like, you're
He's like, all right, well, that's enough, and I'll leave now. Like,
it's really good. It's very funny.
Spicoli isn't like, this is unfair, I'm pissed. He's just, like, resigned to it. He's
he's just like, so, like, these dudes just didn't want anybody telling them what to do, so they signed this piece of paper, right? And he's like, that's pretty much the gist of it, yeah.
And then there's the really good of, like, as Mr. Hand's leaving, he just looks at, like, the porn on his wall, and he's just like...
just shakes his head.
Shakes his head and leaves.
Oh my god, yeah. There's lots of good stuff there.
The biology teacher, everything with that was very... Mm-hmm. I was like, would they do that in the 80s? They took them to a morgue, and were like, we're opening up this guy's body. In a high school biology
high school?
class? That's nuts.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I also really liked, there's a gag that played on 2 levels after I looked it up, which was really funny, which is Mike is talking to Mark about how to, like, you know, what to do on his date with Stacy or whatever, and he's giving him his tips.
Yeah.
And, like, the last tip he gives is he's like, if you want the mood, like, play side B of, like...
of Led Zeppelin 4.
Led Zeppelin 4. And then it cuts, and... What I found out is that they couldn't get the rights to Led Zeppelin 4, so it's a different album. But it plays on another level of Mike just being too stupid to know which album to play, so he plays the wrong album.
Yeah.
I'm like, and I looked it up, and apparently, like, that got raucous laughter in the theater at the time. Because, like, all the kids got the joke.
Yeah.
That he's just too stupid to play the
and also,
wrong album.
like, on the other side of it, it's just really funny that Mark, who's, like, this nerdy guy... And he's driving, like, Stacy, who's also not, like, they're not the coolest people.
Yeah.
And he's just playing it a little too loud. Mm-hmm. But she isn't like, can you turn it down? They're just having a conversation.
And they're just talking a little too loud.
And then they just end up at the restaurant. And I was like, that's a good bit.
That's a good bit.
They don't do the obvious thing. It's just like, all right.
Right.
Moving on. I loved how big the chairs of the restaurant were.
That cracked me up, too.
Amy Heckerling did that. She wanted to highlight how young they are. But they're acting like they, like, know how adults go on dates. And so they're in these massive, like huge like study chairs in a restaurant, and I was like, that's gross because if food gets on that sucks.
Yeah,
but it was very fun.
I was wondering if they like deliberately made their seats lower.
Yes, they did. So they made them look like kids.
That's
which
so
I thought
funny.
was a very good touch.
It's a good sight gag.
It is.
That scene also has another, again, just relatable high school things of he forgets his wallet, and rather than just being honest and saying, hey, I'm going to call my friend to bring my wallet, like, I'm so sorry, I forgot it.
He calls Mike and tells him to bring it, and Mike is like, fine, but you owe me. And then it cuts to, he's just continued to order food.
It just keeps adding stuff on.
Mike is taking forever to show up. It's really funny.
And then Mike shows up and pretends to be nonchalant. He's like, oh, you forgot my wallet.
I found your wallet.
Like, he doesn't just slide it to him in a handshake. He's just,
hey, I found your wallet the other day. Do you want it back? And he tosses it to him. He's like, thanks. And Stacy, like, knows what's going on.
Yeah, Stacy's clued it in. But it's just like, again, all those things of, like, things that would be so easy to explain, but you're too embarrassed to explain them.
Yeah. So really good.
Good stuff.
I also was, like, very much rooting for Mark.
Yeah.
I think they did a good job of, he's, obviously I'm going to relate to the nerdy kid who works at the movie theater, because that was me.
Yeah.
Never in high school, though. They didn't let me in. Anyway, until after I graduated.
See, I worked at movie theater in high school.
Nice.
So.
Very cool. I'm glad that we both fit this archetype.
Yeah, we both are rats.
Nice. But I did also, when Mike and Stacy get together, I liked Mark's anger. I liked that Mark stood up to him, and I liked that it wasn't overplayed too much.
Yeah.
It was just very again, it's just very real.
Yeah, it's very honest.
It's very honest. But I did what was I going to say about, what was I building up to before I went off a tangent about us?
I don't know.
Oh, I was rooting for Mark and Stacy.
Yeah.
Like, I root for them, and also right after that date that they go on, Stacy brings him back to her house, and her parents are gone, her brother's gone, and I'm like, all right, Mark, all right, you're gonna, you're doing it, or whatever. This movie, Parker, you know that I love hand-holding cinema.
I know.
Which is a shot where two hands slowly creep towards each other.
Yes.
And it makes me cry, and it makes me so excited all the time. This movie doesn't have a single moment of hand-holding cinema.
Nope.
Instead, when Mark and Stacey are about to have sex, it shows their feet, like their toes curling and getting nervous. And I was like, I'll take it. But it's not hand-holding cinema.
Yeah, you're not a feet guy?
No.
Okay.
I'll say it on the podcast right now.
Be on record.
I'm not a feet guy.
Eat your heart out, Tarantino.
Yeah. Quentin Tarantino loved that part of Fast Times, I'm sure. Yeah.
No, I agree.
But everything with Brad is really funny.
Brad's just...
Especially even just Linda coming in while he's masturbating to her, basically. Not to her, but she walks to the bathroom and he's just like... She's like, I'm sorry. Backs out, and then he goes, doesn't anyone knock anymore? And it's said with just such, not even embarrassment.
It's just like, inconvenience. Yeah, it's really funny.
It's really funny. And his whole story's great, because he gets fired from his job at the burger joint he takes very seriously.
Yep.
Then he works at a horrible fish place.
Yep.
He has to wear a pirate costume. And he wears it out to pick up things for the restaurant. I thought that was very funny.
Yeah, sees a cute girl, doesn't realize he's wearing the costume, and then gets really frustrated and throws everything he's supposed to deliver out the window. It's good. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Good stuff.
The last thing that I'll say before we move to criteria, something that I really loved about the movie, and it was literally like the inverse of the Boss Baby meme of oh, this gives me Boss Baby vibes. Yeah. I was like, oh, this feels very American Graffiti. And then I looked it up, and that's Amy Heckerling has cited that as a huge inspiration.
Oh, sure.
She's like, oh, I want it to be that. I want it to be series of events rather than a storyline. And it works beautifully that way.
Has there been a modern high school movie that does that isn't narrative based? Because immediately you think of things like Superbad and Booksmart and those things. But I don't know if there was one in the 2000s. I feel like now high school culture is very different.
None are coming to mind. I'm sure.
There's got to be the one.
Somebody's got to. Yeah, there's got to be one. I don't know them off the top of my head.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see that.
Yeah.
To see if American Graffiti is that for the. I guess that came out in the 70s. Though.
It did, but it's made for the 50s.
Made for the 50s generation, and then you have this one that just happened.
60s.
Then you have this one in the 80s that just happened to come out, made by people who weren't growing up at the time. But they're pretty 27 and 22.
Sure.
That's very close.
Yeah, exactly. So I just thought that was interesting.
One for the 50s, 60s gang, one for the 80s.
Yeah.
There's probably more that I can't think of right now.
I mean, I know
Freaks and Geeks a little bit, but that's a show.
Yeah, that's a show, and I know that things like High Fidelity, I think, have some of that for the 90s and things like that.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
It'd be interesting to look at.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did. So, all right. So, are we gonna?
Yeah, let's do criteria.
I do want to point out that I do think that the ending of Brad and Spicoli's stories are very funny. It's just an odd note, but it is really funny. If Brad's now working at a convenience store, Spicoli comes in, and then he goes into the bathroom and then an armed gunman comes in and is like asking. I love Brad being like, they don't teach me.
He's like, I just started.
Like, get off my fucking back, man. And then Spicoli comes out and distracts him, and then he takes him out. And he's just like, way to go, Brad. Like, that's a fun wrap up of those stories.
It is a nice little bit.
I also like that Spicoli got to go to the prom, the big dance, and he got to sing on the stage, and someone's like, get down from there, but no one stops him.
Nobody stops him.
Because again, he's a stoner, but he's not annoying in that way.
Yeah.
There's no, like, he doesn't cross the line for me.
Sure.
At any time. He's mostly just like a decent guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he wrecks that car. He wrecks Forrest Whitaker's car. But,
Yeah.
They won the football game.
Sure.
So, anyway. All right, criteria.
All right, criteria. Historical or technical relevance.
So I have one more quote from the essay, because I've been thinking about this a lot.
Okay.
Because I already kind of know what my answer is. But I'm torn because I think that Fast Times is going to take... We'll talk about it. Okay. So this is what I wanted to point out, is that this is the quote. I didn't put the whole quote in here, but it's like, Valley Speak became a part of the teen lingo for the rest of that decade and has persisted in ever-mutating forms into our own time. And so this is where I think the historical relevance comes in that this is kind of the movie that introduces the California stoner character. The Valley, I think that that's a huge point.
Sure.
Fast Times, because that has become a stereotype and an archetype and a character that you see in like every high school thing ever.
Sure.
There's someone, and it's mutated.
Yeah.
But I think this is, from what I understand from what she's saying here, again, I didn't do any further research. I'm not going to take it that seriously. It's Fast Times at Ridgemont High. But from what I understand, Spicoli is kind of that initial character, which then gave way to Bill and Ted and everyone that came after.
Yeah. You see that.
And so that's why I'm like, obviously I understand why so much of the marketing around this movie is that character, because it was probably revolutionary at the time. Well, but for me, I'm now how much removed, and I'm just like, all right, I've seen it.
A quick fun fact along those same lines that came from trivia is that this movie is single-handedly responsible for, like, not even the resurgence, but just like the huge boom of vans as popular shoes, specifically the checkerboard vans that Spicoli was hitting his head with.
Yeah.
It's because of this movie.
Wow, there you go.
Just
and they're still,
sales blew up.
Kicking today.
Still kicking today. I can definitely see that point. I can hold space for that.
Right, but I'm not saying that gives it the point.
Sure.
I just am saying
that's
it's historically relevant.
Yeah. I think my gut says this one has to go to Citizen Kane. Like it's hard to argue it, but I get that is a good point to bring up, and there are things to be said about it. And again, this film is in the National Film Registry. It's an important movie for sure.
It's probably on all of the 1001 movies you see before you die.
Probably,
or whatever.
But I think Citizen Kane probably gets the point.
I think
for me.
so too, because again, on a technical level, and also just everything else about it. Because I don't think I could give this movie a point over Citizen Kane in that category.
Yeah. Okay.
But do want to point out though that I'm pretty sure it's not exact on the Citizen Kane to Fast Times side, but it's basically 40 years between Citizen Kane and this, and 40 years from this to now.
Ah!
So this is exactly in the middle of that 80-year period.
Nice.
I thought was very interesting.
That is very interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
So there you go.
There you go.
Anyway. All right.
How well is it doing what it's trying to do?
I think it's doing it very well.
I think so.
I think it's killing it. I don't know. Is there anything that didn't work? I mean, so what is it trying to do? It's trying to show high school.
Yeah, it's just trying to show high school.
I think it does a great job of that.
I think it does a really good job of that.
To the point that I can still relate to it now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it doing it better than Citizen Kane?
That's what I'm asking myself. I'm like,
Yeah.
This is going to be the tiebreaker. Let's move on to the next one, because I know the next one, which is just personal enjoyment.
Yeah.
Fast Times.
Fast Times.
It's just a fun movie.
Yeah.
I had a good time watching this.
Yeah.
And I don't really have much else to say about it. It emotionally connected with me.
Yeah.
And again, I laughed where I was supposed to laugh and genuinely felt something.
Right.
During that one scene.
I think if this movie had just been laughs the whole way through, I'd be like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a little closer, but I think because it also emotionally resonated with me.
Yeah.
It made me feel something other than just we're having a fun time. We're having a fast time.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna give the point.
I think Fast Time. So I think.
And again, there might be a modern bias of this is a genre and a kind of movie that I really enjoy.
Sure.
And as opposed to Citizen Kane, which is enjoyable, but it's it's harder to penetrate than Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
No, that's definitely fair.
But it's my podcast, and I get to say that I like this more than Citizen Kane.
Perfect. Okay, so that's 1-1.
Yes.
Now we have to come back to this tiebreaker.
And this was my concern.
Uh-huh.
Because I didn't know which of those first two it would be for me. But I think you made it clear. I think that I agree with that, is what I'm saying. You convinced me. I'm not just like agreeing with you.
Sure.
You put down your foot, and I respect that now. Because I think that I would give 2 votes to Fast Times. But I don't know if I can say, like, morally and legally that it's better.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And we did that before. We did that with something else.
We got so close to saying that Forrest Gump was technically
based on the criteria.
Based on the criteria, we said it. And then we actually took a step back and asked a question like, what are you talking about?
Right. So I think this opens up something in the show that will probably happen in the future and is maybe not as interesting as forcing myself to agree with what the criteria says.
Sure.
Because that makes it like, well, I guess this is better. But I think in my heart, I like this more.
Sure.
But I don't think I can say that this is better than Citizen Kane.
Right, because I mean that's the whole challenge of the premise we've set up for ourselves. Is that
we gave ourselves a challenge.
We have to say definitively as a show, we have to come to a consensus, and we have to have like
the criteria is just there to help us reach that conclusion.
Right. It's there to help us realize like objectively subjective opinions.
Yeah.
Like everything we feel about these movies is subjective, right? Like, we hands down 3s across the board said that Puss in Boots: The Last Wish was better than Citizen Kane, and I stand by it. But I'm sure that some film school professor would vehemently disagree with me, and is probably right.
Right. And again, like, I had a friend come to me recently, and I think I will bring it up next year. I think I'll bring it up at the start of next year, where I think it would be interesting to look at Citizen Kane in a different lens and see if we've been wrong about what it's trying to do. Take another look at it.
No, I think,
And because I think, but again, I love what you just said of like objectively subjective.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the motto of this show.
Absolutely.
This is objectively subjective.
Yes. So entirely on the same basis, I would agree with you, is that me personally, my 100% subjective feel, I like this more than I like Citizen Kane.
Right. Because it's a fun movie.
It's a fun movie and I'm having a good time.
And it breezes by and you have a good time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas objectively subjective, I have to look at it and say, I can't honestly tell you that Fast Times at Ridgemont High is better than Citizen Kane.
Right. And it's not.
It's not.
But I like it more.
Sure.
I would watch this way more.
Yeah.
I would come home and I would go, I could watch Fast Times right now.
Right.
Maybe I'll buy it in the Criterion.
Yeah.
Maybe. We'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe. I like
so I think we can definitively chalk this up as a common Citizen Kane W.
So you'd say, did you vote the 2 for Fast Times?
I think I'm voting the 2 for Kane.
Okay.
I think Kane.
Then I think I'll vote 2 for Fast Times.
We can split the difference there, because again, I will say that I think the reason I'm going to say Kane works better at doing what it's wanting to do is that I also get a little bit bored during Citizen Kane, but that's an inherently kind of boring movie.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be getting bored in this movie, and I got a little bored. So I think that's the
difference.
That's the difference for me.
That's a half a star.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I rated this higher than Citizen Kane.
Yeah. For me. And I was the same as Citizen Kane. So I was like, all right. Yeah.
Well, there you go. So Fast Times at Ridgemont High is not better than Citizen Kane with an asterisk.
With an asterisk.
A small asterisk.
Yes.
Nice.
Great. All right, cool.
Glad we got that squared away.
Absolutely.
That was weighing on me for a few months.
I know. Well, that was a fun one to do. I enjoy watching the ones that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah.
That's a good time.
It's really good.
It's a really good time.
A good time at Ridgemont High.
A good time.
They could have really franchised this.
They could have.
Just kept.
Absolutely. Well, I think American Graffiti did that and it didn't work out for them. So.
Oh yeah, there's a sequel to that, isn't there?
Anyway. What are we going to be watching next time, Max?
Next time we're watching Casablanca.
We're
going to have a guest.
We are going to have a guest.
Very exciting.
Very good friend, Mike Hellhall, is going to be joining us.
Nice.
And she has a lot to talk about with this movie, which I'm very excited about. So
very fun to just throw it right back.
Absolutely.
We're going back to the 40s.
We're going back to the 40s.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for, keeping with us through some technical hookups and less than stellar.
Sorry. Did this movie invent the titles at the end telling you where everyone ended up?
No, it did not. American Graffiti does that too.
Okay, well, it did it.
Yeah, it did do that. I don't know. I don't know what the first one to do it was, but unfortunately,
it was Citizen Kane.
It was Citizen.
At the end of Citizen Kane, they say Rosebud went on to burn in an oven. Kane is dead, so you can't say anything about him.
Yeah.
The journalist went on to write some more pieces.
His buddy stayed horny in a nursing home. There we go.
Can we do an edit of that?
I think we might.
Put the text over the top.
I think we should.
The phrase "rosebud went on to burn in an oven" is really on a furnace. It's really funny.
That is very good. I like that. Great.
All right. Anyway,
thanks, everybody. That's all right. We'll see you next time.
Bye.